Welcome back. In this lesson we will understand everything about tuples, which is a second advanced data type. So what is a Python tuple? It's a special case of a list where the elements cannot change. Okay, so we can say that tuples are immutable, and we create tuples using circular brackets just like this. And we need also to know that indexing and slicing are the same as lists. So what we learned in the lists and strings regarding indexing and slicing we can use in Python tuple. So what do you think the output of this code? We have my tuple 1 2 3, right? And we want to change the index number 1 to be 1. Okay, so we want to change this 2 to be 1. So we want to have 1 1 and 3. This code will give you a syntax error, and we will go right now to Colab and see how we can create Python tuples, how we can see the syntax errors, and even more stuff about tuples in Python. So let's go. So here we are inside Google Colab, and here we created the tuple, which is 1, 2, and 5.3. And when we print the type of this tuple, we will see that the class is tuple. So that's okay. This is how we can create a tuple, using this comma to separate the elements and the circular brackets to differentiate between the tuple and the list. So if we try first to just print my tuple 1, you will see that we have 2. So this means that the tuple is in fact ordered, right? Because this is index number 0, this is index number 1, and this is index number 2. But if we try to assign 4 to this 2, so instead of 2 we want to have 4 in this place. If we try to do so, you will see that we have an error saying type error, tuple object doesn't support item assignment. And if you remember from the last lesson, this is very similar to what we saw on the strings, right? So when we try to change some elements in a string, we saw the error saying string object doesn't support item assignment. So this is the same exact error, but instead of the string, we see here that we have tuple. So this means that tuples are in fact immutable. Okay, so how we can create empty tuples? Now, if we just do something like this using this circular brackets and we print the empty tuple, you will see that we have the length of this empty tuple is 0. And if we print the type of this empty tuple, you will see that we have class tuple, right? So this is how we can create a tuple that is basically empty. Okay, now the problem is when we want to create a tuple with one element. So here we have a tuple which has only one element, a string called Ahmed, right? Now if we print the type of this tuple, you will see that it's in fact a string, not a tuple. And if we do the same now with 2, right, so we should have a tuple, not just 2. You will see that we have also the class is integer. So this means the type of this data type is integer and not a tuple. So how we can create a tuple with just one element, that is Ahmed 2 or anything? We can do so using the trailing comma. Okay, so we just put a comma in the end after these circular brackets. We just put a comma here. Okay, so we just put a comma here and we put a comma here. So if we do so, you will see that we have now a tuple and a tuple. So we cannot change the elements here, and we can perform all the operations using the tuples, not integers or strings. So this is very important to understand if you want to create a tuple that is empty or a tuple with just one element. Okay, now there is also another concept that is very important called tuple packing, and this is how we can do it. Basically, if we want to have a tuple without the circular brackets, we can do this. So we can have it with the circular brackets or without the circular brackets. So if we just create some elements, right? Or some variables or some integers, strings or whatever, and we put this comma between the elements. So by default, Python will understand that this is a tuple. So as you can see here, we can see that the first element, the second element, and the third element, and we have the circular brackets that differentiate the tuple from the list or from any other data type. And we can see also that the type of this data type is a tuple. And we can do the inverse operation. So we can do sequence unpacking. So we can go and we have this tuple containing 3 elements, right? So we can assign these 3 elements to 3 variables, just like this. X, comma, Y, comma, Z equal T, which is this variable. Right now, if we print X, Y, and Z, you will see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and hello. Right? So this is X, this is Y, and this is Z. Now, the last thing that you need to understand is the tuple functions. We didn't discuss functions yet, but functions are basically things that take some input and it can return outputs. So it takes some input and returns some output, perform some logic on this input, and then it can return an output or not, right? So we will see what do we mean exactly by function in a future lesson. But you need to understand that all the data types that we have in Python have built-in functions, okay? So how we can see these built-in functions and use them? Let's say that we have the variable called t, right? And this is the variable that we created, or the variable called tuple underscore 1. Now, if we just write dot, right? So tuple 1 dot, you will see that we have 2 functions, right? And you can see here built-in function or method, okay? And we can read more about this function by just clicking here, right? So you can see that this function, what it does is that return number of occurrences of value. So we should give it a value, right? And this value should be an integer. And what this function will do is perform some logic and then return the number of occurrences for this specific value that we specified. So let's do this. Let's create a tuple here, and let's say that this tuple contains 2, 1, 2, 3, and then 2, right? Now, if we want to count the number of 2's we have in this tuple, we can just write tuple1 dot count, and then we open these circular brackets. But now these circular brackets are not correlated to the tuple ones, okay? It's correlated to the function. So if we want to call a function, we just open these circular brackets, okay? So we can use the circular brackets for tuples or for calling a function, okay? And this will be more clear when we go to the function port, okay? So we will just write 2 here. This is the input for this function. And now if we want to print the output, we will just print tuple1 dot count 2. So whatever the output from this function, it will be printed, okay? So as you can see, we have 3, right? Or what we could do is that, let's say, return function, right? This is the variable that this function will return in, okay? So now if we print return function, you will see that we have also 3, okay? Now, what are the other functions that we have in a tuple? Let's do this again, tuple1 dot, and you can see we have index. So what is the index function? You don't know yet, right? So you can read the documentation, and this is from the Python documentation. You can read that it returns first index of value, raises value, error of the value is not present, okay? So what we will do basically is just index, right? And we want to search for the index of a specific value. So we will search for the index of 1, for example, right? It will return 1. What about the index of 3? It will return 3. What about the index of 2? It will return 0. This is the first occurrence for this value. So there are some use cases for the count function or the index function, and this is basically the 2 functions that are available for the tuple. But for the list, we have also many functions. For the dictionaries, as we will see in the next lesson, we also have many functions that we can use, and so on and so forth. We also have functions in the strings, as we saw before, and in order to understand, or in order to learn more about these functions, we cannot really discuss every single function for every single data type. And when we go to the libraries, you will see that in the libraries like NumPy, Pandas, or Matplotlib, you will see that we have hundreds or even thousands of functions that you can use. So we cannot really discuss all of these. But what we want to teach you in this course is how you can search for yourself, how you can read the documentation yourself, and how you can understand what is the problem that we want to solve here, and you can search for the solution yourself. Okay, so it's like, don't give me a fish, but teach me how to catch a fish myself. Okay, so what we want to teach you in this course is how you can catch a fish, right? Or basically how you can understand the code yourself, how you can read the codes, and how you can search for yourself. So in the next lesson, we will learn dictionaries, what do we mean by dictionaries, and how they are different from tuples and lists. So let's go.